So my name is Ellen Mejia Hooper. I am the facility director of facilities planning and construction. We have multiple people on the district tonight for facilitation. So I will let them introduce themselves, and then we will go to Mr. Duffy, who has an introduction.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Melissa Payne, and I'm the Director of Contracts Administration.
Good evening. I'm Louis Reed, Associate Superintendent for Facilities, and welcome everybody tonight, and we greatly appreciate your participation.
Hi, my name is Jose de Leon. I'm representing tonight a WCCAA, which is the Administrators Association, as part of Solutions team.
All right, we were actually going to have, because we have so many of us, I don't know if we'll go through everybody's that's on the committee's introduction. We do have a list of who's participating that can be found on the website. But in a matter of time, and since we've only got an hour, we would like to make sure we make it through the overall introductions. The other thing that we would like to check before we get going is there is a committee member recording. So we would like to confirm that you are giving your consent for being recording. So I'm launching a poll now to confirm that you are okay with that. Uh-oh. Are they still allowed to? So if you could click whether you are okay, if you give your consent for being recorded or not okay at this time, that would be great. You should see the question up on the screen.
Do not see the question up on the screen.
Okay, let me try launching.
I think that's only for attendees.
Perfect. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Sorry for that. All right. So we have 22 out of the 26 that have answered. So we only have a couple more that have not answered. So if you would take a moment to answer the poll, especially those who are just joining. And it looks like, did you see the note about Charles?
And promoted, yes. Thank you.
All right. So we have almost everybody replied, and the answers were all yes. So we just wanted to make sure that we had consent before we recorded, or let you know that recording was occurring. All right. So if Mr. Duffy, you would like to kick us off?
Sure. Well, thank you everybody for being here. This is my 5th year in the district, and right before I started, the district had just finished their facilities master plan. And it's a pretty cool document. I always thought it was really one of the best things that I had seen coming into the district. And times have passed by. The world has changed a bit. Certainly, we've seen our environment change quite substantially with the increase in fires, smoke, COVID. So it's a really important opportunity for us to look at the criteria by which we're going to make the choices around how we prioritize facilities. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your help in this. I'm sure it will be said later. You know, your job isn't necessarily to promote one school or the other, but really help us set that criteria, figure out what the most important criteria will be in determining where and how we prioritize the dollars and the significant dollars that taxpayers just gave us in the form of $575 million in our last bond. So we're looking to maximize that money, use it very effectively. And we have an opportunity now, almost 5 years later, to make sure we have the criteria right for how we apply those dollars. This is an incredible mix of people, of parents, students, community members, staff members. So as you go through this time together, I hope you do get to know each other, get to know the district, and learn a little more along the way. So again, thank you very, very much for taking part in this. It's important work. Thanks staff for putting this together. And with that, I will let you all proceed. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And we're so happy to have you all here tonight. We know that this is a major commitment that you make to the district, and we really appreciate your time and your ability to join us. And we hope you will be able to join us over the lengths of this committee. Let me share my screen one more time here. And so the overall plan for this evening is we are going to have the meeting discussion items of establishing norms of the committee, reviewing the 2016 master plan and prioritization process, review the role of the committee, and review the community survey results. And then at the end, we will have additional public comment. The overall introduction is we want to make sure that understanding the role of the committee is really updating that criteria, which Mr. Duffy covered nicely. On the right, you will see a list of all the different representatives that we have around the district. So we do have representatives from different departments within the district, the labor partners, committees that the district has established, and last but not least, the 2 student representatives from each feeder pattern and 1 parent representative from each feeder pattern. So there's 28 of you in total, and so this is a large committee. And that being said, we need to establish some level of norms and how the committee will operate. And while ideally we would come up with these together through a process, we want to respect your time. And the CBOC actually came up with a really great list of things that they try to do as part of their meetings. And so we thought we would bring that forward to this group and really talk about how we need to, as a team, pay attention to the committee's purpose and be careful to use the process to accomplish that purpose. We want team members to interact and communicate with each other and be responsible and accountable. And I'm sorry, we left even the CBOC in there, but to the prioritization purpose. We need to recognize that there are a bunch of different people on this call, and it requires patience and openness to understand the different perspectives. All viewpoints, of course, are important. Participation needs to be equitable and balanced. We would ask that as we're doing comments on a particular item, that we would go through everybody who wants to speak before we round back for second comments. Expect, respect, and accept disagreements. We have a bunch of different viewpoints here, and everybody's passionate about their schools, as they should be, but we need to be looking at the district at large and be tough on issues, not on each other. We are going through a very dramatic time right now. Everybody's stress levels are higher than they've always been, and we need to recognize and be kind to one another. So we will have opportunities for public comment within the agenda. It is item C at this current meeting. This is not a Brown Act meeting, however. So the public is welcome to attend and have public comment when it's designated. We will allot a total of 20 minutes for that activity. And each speaker will be allowed up to 2 minutes depending on how many speakers there are. Moving on from there, and I don't see any hand raised. So if you do have a comment or a question throughout this process, feel free to raise your hand as a committee member so that if we need to pause in the presentation, we can. Today is going to be the most that I will ever talk at these, I promise. Past this point, there will be a whole lot more of you talking than us talking, but we want to make sure that you have a background to be able to make good decisions. So as part of that background, there is the 2000 Facilities Master Plan. It is available on the web page. So down here, this is the web page you can go to. The cover of the document looks like this. It was a process that took 11 months. There were a lot of different components to it. We had a steering committee. We went to school site councils. We had community meetings, as well as a prioritization committee for that plan. So the prioritization committee did something very similar to this process before, and now we are reforming it for the update. An additional step that we did within the Facilities Master Plan was the assessments, which is apparently my next slide. But the overall master's plan's purpose was to focus on 21 school sites that were originally defined because they were either in some level of planning phases for projects that had been stopped and were in the most need. So the list of the 21 school sites you'll see there on the right, 2 of them are grayed out, and that's because Wilson Elementary, now Michelle Obama, is almost complete. If you want to go to the ribbon cutting, as a side note, it is on Thursday at 11 o'clock. You can see it on Facebook Live, either at the district's Facebook page or Michelle Obama School Facebook page. And Lake is just underway. So we've contracted a bridging document, and their rebuild process is started. So those 2 schools have been eliminated from this list, but we are down to 19 that need to be relooked at in the lens of the addition of Measure R funding. So an additional component of the master plan process was doing the school site assessments. So the architectural and planning team that did the original master plan went around to the 21 school sites and assigned a value from 0 to 100 on many different criteria. And they were grouped into 4 major components: building condition, building function, site condition, and site function. And you can think of condition like, you know, if the building or the site is in a state of disrepair, right? The carpets are, you can see there's seams, or there's rips in the carpet, or the paving has the cracks in it, or the window surrounds aren't weather tight any longer, there's roofing issues. Those are condition items. The building functionality really talks about how well the building fits the educational program. So this really talks about design and the space and the amenities that you need to be able to have a useful, functional school. So it's one thing to have a building that's in good shape. It's another thing to have a building that's actually appropriate for learning. And so that's what the function looks at. So the reason we're going so in depth to this is because these scores are actually used as the metrics for quite a few of the 2016 criteria. So we want to make sure you understand where they're coming from. So your major role, again, is updating that criteria to serve as a basis to reorder it. This committee is going to look through a community survey tonight. I'm going to take in that information, talk about it, think about it, and come up with a recommendation to send forward to the board. We're planning for this to take approximately 4 meetings in total. And at the end, we break down how that'll occur across the 4 meetings. This committee is not tasked with discussing the merits of an individual school site. So if we go down that road, we're going to remind people that that's not what we're here for. We really do want to keep it to the broader picture of what the metrics and criteria should be. Those will be applied to all 21 schools or 19 schools, and that will create the prioritization and sequencing. All right, so on to the community survey. We had a fantastic response to the community survey. We had just under 2,000 responses, which for a first round of a master plan survey is incredible. 1,794 of them were in English. We had over 200 of them in Spanish. Most of them identified themselves as family members. You'll notice that these numbers don't add up exactly to the total, and that's because they could select more than one. So there's family members, faculty, staff, and administration, community members, and students. And they came from all across the district. So again, this was one where they were allowed to check more than one that applied. So if you add up all of these numbers, it will add up to more than 2,000. But as you can see, we do have great representation from across the district. So now we're going to go through each individual question that was centered around an existing criteria. So on the left, you're going to see what the original criteria was from 2016, what metric, or how did we come up with a way to measure what this criteria was, and then a weight. And the weight is basically whatever your score was between 1 and 10, it was multiplied by 6 for this particular item. So you'll see the same format on all of the slides with the original criteria, metric, and weight on the left, and on the right, the results of the 2020 community survey. This particular one was how many improvement projects have been completed at the school site since it was originally built. And you can see we did a calculation from all the dollars from 2015, from 1991 to 2015, including bond funds and state matching on that site. So in general, we had a 3, so middle of the road between whether this was least important or most important for this particular one. The next criteria was physical conditions. So again, that went back to that assessment I was just referring to. It had a weight of 5 in the original criteria. And the community voted on this one as it being basically most important. The next one is functionality. Again, it was using those scores that I talked about. The weight was 6. And this one landed in the 4. So still towards the most important, but not as high as the physical condition. ADA compliance, and ADA in this particular instance is the America with Disabilities Act, which really talks about being able to ensure access for all. And so our question here was, how easy is it for a person with disabilities to access the buildings? We got 5. Most important was how the community voted in this case for the most part. Seismic needs, there was a structural report done in 2002 that was given to the district for these different sites. And so that was used as the metric prior to be able to determine the score for this particular criteria. And the results for this was a 4. One background piece that you should know about this one, though, is that the original master plan had projects that were called critical needs. And the biggest of these critical needs projects were really addressing the worst of our seismic issues on campuses. So we did complete projects or are in the process of completing projects that helped alleviate these biggest need items. The next criteria is age of school. And this is really going back to just the original building on the school site. How old was it? This one was kind of interesting on the response, though. It really scattered between 3, 4, and 5 with a smattering in 1 and 2. So that one was kind of interesting how it came back. Completed the phases of design. So when the facility master plan started in 2016, there were quite a few schools that had either master plans or some level of architectural design completed, but there was not enough funding to build all of those plans. So that was part of the reason why this process moved forward and we needed the original prioritization list. And so this particular item talks about whether the school site did have a design in place or not, going forward from that original time. Just as a side note though, those original plans have now become outdated and we would have to bring them back to make sure they update to code and they are not in alignment with our current educational specification or standards. So there would be some rework that would need to be done to move forward with any of these plans, but it was more of a nod to school sites that had been selected and had been moving forward with a design and then was stopped. As far as how the community felt about this, we had the most at 3, but you can see that we have a little bit of distribution to the other numbers. Economically disadvantaged area. This was taken from the median income of the census tract, where the school site was located. So this was trying to say that a school site is in a particular area that may or may not have lower income or higher income. And if you had lower income where the school site was actually located, then you should have additional consideration, right? And so this had a weight of 3, and you can see here that 3 was the most popular of the answers, but of course we had additional support for the other rankings as well. Eligibility for state funding. So the state of California has a program that allows school sites to qualify for state matching funds. You do have to have local funds to match with your state funds. It is an application process. There are rules about when you're eligible to apply and when you're not eligible to apply. At this current moment, the state does not have any funding left in that bucket though. And there are statewide bonds that come on periodically. The last statewide bond, which was Prop 13, was not passed by voters. And so that's why we don't have any funding available at this time, which is why we added this additional note to the community survey to let people know that while this is something to be considered, it is not something that we would actually be able to access. We can continue to apply though, however, and this funding has been renewed over time. So the likelihood of us being able to eventually have matching funds reimbursed to the district is definitely a possibility. Next one is percent of ESL foster youth or low income. This, of course, mirrors the LCAP requirements and is the unduplicated count is what we used as the metric. Again, this had a variety of answers from the community, the top getter 5, but then 3 was close following. Lack of technology infrastructure. And this we have to be careful because it's not how many computers are in the school site or how many projectors or the type of technology you get your hands on, but really the backbone of the system. So what's inside the buildings, what wiring and switches, And those components do we have within the building, which allows for your Wi-Fi coverage and strength and speed of the internet around the campus. This one got a 5 and it had a weight of 2. And we're almost done. Over or nearing capacity, the utilization without portables. So this particular criteria talked about how many students could fit into a building in only the permanent building. So if you have portables on site, those were not counted as a place where students could be. This had a weight of 1, and this had a response in the survey highest of 5. So those were all of the original criteria from 2016 and what the community felt about them. The survey also asked if additional criteria should be considered. And I'm just checking to make sure we didn't have any questions before we moved on to this from the original criteria. But it doesn't look like it.
Don has a question.
Don has a question? Don, go ahead. Oh, just a second. You're talking, but we can't hear you.
Go ahead, Don.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, you're talking nonstop, so I didn't raise my hand. I've got half a page worth of questions and comments. I apologize for that, but if we waited the full hour, I'd take another hour for my questions and comments. One little comment, maybe I'm the only person that feels this is important, but it would be very beneficial to me if I were to have a copy of these presentations before we showed up for meetings, so that we can read it in advance instead of trying to read it while we're listening to what your comments are on there. That way we can have questions prepared in advance. I would appreciate it. When you had your list of the schools, I would also like to see that the Mandarin School is listed as a separate standalone school, not wherever temporary campus it may be sitting on at this time, because somebody needs to make a decision. Either we're going to keep the school or we're not going to keep the school. And if we're going to keep the school, we need to pick a location for it, and then so it's included on the facilities master plan list as a priority to try to figure out what are we going to do with that. And one thing I didn't see in any of your presentation there is, should we be considering social equity on this? I bring this up because at least 2 board members says that is the most important thing for them to consider whether when we make our presentation to them. On one of your criteria, the first criteria you mentioned, how many projects have been completed? Is every project the same? I mean, is sharpening a pencil the same as building a whole new campus? I mean, when you're going to give it weight, is it just the count of the projects that have been completed, or is it the size of the project, for instance?
It actually was the dollars completed versus the student count. So we had the problem of, like, we have elementary schools that are much smaller than high schools. So the idea was that the original criteria counted every dollar that had been spent divided by the number of students that were currently enrolled.
Okay. In one of your slides, you use an acronym, IEP2. You care to share with some of us what that is?
That was one of the consultants that prepared the original master plan.
Okay, that's good to know. And you talked about some of the, in the previous facilities master plan, that we had a number of plans that had already been drawn up and even approved. Because we had for a while that when we were getting matching funds, if we had projects that were shovel ready, we were moved to the front of the list. We actually received about $200 million because we had shovel ready plans. At that time, that was 4 to 5 elementary schools that we didn't have to pay for, which was a good thing. But since we have changed the specification codes, those plans are virtually, well, they have little value now. And so, I mean, it's a shame, because this was an issue for the Bond Oversight Committee. Why did we spend $25 to $40 million on plans that we then just threw away? But also, I'm just a little concerned on one of your last slides on the technology infrastructure. It seemed like it was a critically important item. I said, and well over 800 people said it was the most important item on there, but it only had a weight of 2. So why was it weighted so low?
Well, you got to remember that the things on the left happened in 2016, and the things on the right happened in 2020. So what this is saying is, originally it had a weight of 1, but now the community's response to the survey says that they think this is a very important component. So one of the jobs that we'll be asking to you guys to do, not tonight, but later, is re-weight these criteria.
Okay.
So that's why we were presenting this, as we're absorbing this information, we're going to be thinking about at a later date what kind of weighting we would like to give to each one of these criteria, if they even survive to be criteria in the future.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification on that, because I thought that this was today's weight based on the community survey results. So I appreciate that.
John,
And with that,
John,
sorry?
okay, good. I was going to say, are you done with your questions? Because we'd like to keep moving.
Yes, I understand your point now. I am done.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 additional questions. Okay.
Okay.
So did we have another hand, or?
Yes, Karen Lane.
Karen Lane.
Karen, go ahead and unmute.
I'm Karen Lang. To the same point that was just made about the Mandarin School, I noticed that Sarah Adult School was listed. And I wanted to know, but if that was 2016, maybe it still was Sarah Adult School, but Dawn made the point that that the Mandarin School is housed somewhere. So I was wondering if Sarah Adult School is still an adult school or no longer an adult school.
Yes, and thank you for that clarification. That was the list from 2016. However, now West County Mandarin School is housed at Sarah Adult School, and the adult school program is no longer there. Okay, and we have additional questions?
No.
No more questions. All right, so next piece. So in addition to all of that component where we were basically asking how important was the criteria that was established in 2016 to 2020. We also asked if there was anything additional that they would like to add to the criteria. There was a total of 610 total comments. We will publish all the comments in their original form. However, we went through all of those comments and really tried to pick out the ones that were most appropriate to become new criteria. And we combined, it was a process of making sure that we had things that were measurable. And so the things that weren't included were specific comments about school site needs, non-measurable criteria like aesthetics, which would be very difficult because what I believe is beautiful and what somebody else believes is beautiful is extremely difficult to judge objectively. Program recommendations. So there were a lot of comments about reducing class size, for example. And while facilities can do a lot of things, reducing class size is not one of them. And then anything that had already been covered in the 2016 criteria. There were quite a few duplicates throughout this. There was a lot of like-mindedness. But what we would like to do before we make it to the next meeting is we're going to share a tool with you, and tonight you will get an email with access to this board. We're going to use Padlet, and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so that I can get the right screen up, and I will come back in a second here. So give me a moment. Now, where did my screen share go? There it is. Okay. So this tool is called Padlet. You may or may not be familiar with it, but it's a great way to get kind of a response and form ideas. This is not a finalized item. This is an exercise to get us further down the road. So what you will see is in yellow, we put the original criteria, and then in white, we put additional criteria that was suggested by the community through the survey. So you can see there's quite a few of them. We're not going to read every single one of them because since this was recommended by the criteria, we don't have any background information about what they were intending or what these pieces could be, but they're all out here for you to see. You'll see that there's both thumbs up and thumbs down, so you can vote on these individually about whether you liked it or you didn't like it. If you double click on it, you say, oh, I didn't really mean to click that, or I see something better down below. You can unclick yourself. You can also add individual comments to this to show if you have additional thoughts, you can do that on a particular item. Or if you go down to this red plus mark, you can actually add a new tile and bring up your own criteria. If you have something that you think should be considered, or if you comb through the comments and think we did not address one appropriately, that can happen as well. So I don't know if you realized that there was homework as part of this, but this committee does have the opportunity to look at this over the next week and kind of respond to these different pieces. And what we'll bring back then is an ordered list of how many ones that got a lot of likes, ones that did not get any likes. We'll see if we can just eliminate a chunk of them. And we'll have a general discussion about all of these items. So that is the game plan. And so, like I said, we will be sending this out for you guys. We are sending it to individual emails so that we know that the committee is responding to this. So you do have to choose a basic plan to be able to get on Padlet, but it is free. And so that will be coming in your mailbox, so look out for it.
Ellen, we have a comment
Yes.
from Ms. Lang in the chat, if you wanted to just take a look at that and address that.
Okay, could you read it for the group?
Sure. We have a comment in the chat from Ms. Lang that says, do we need to add a new criteria for small school communities rather than larger, 600 to 700 family schools versus 100 family schools in the pandemic world of the 21st century?
And that can totally be something that you add to this Padlet, and it can be, then people are able to put their thumbs up and thumbs down on it. So as soon as you get this in your email, we can, you can go ahead and add a tile. Again, that's done right through this bottom button.
So in the email would be a closing date on when would be the last day to submit this?
We are looking to close it 1 week from now, just so that we can process it before the next meeting. So that way we'll have the results, and hopefully we might even be able to get that presentation out early for Dawn and everybody else.
So since this is an evening meeting, we're thinking that's November 4th, the Wednesday?
Yes.
If individuals are adding new criteria and folks are asked to vote on some of that, there should be a date when they can stop posting criteria so folks can come back and reassess those criteria that were added. They want to include that in the email.
Okay, we can do that.
And when creating new criteria, it may be helpful to break it into individual ideas so
Yes.
that we can get lots of feedback. I think that in the chat, I think it's fantastic. Adding new criteria, I would just recommend splitting it up into its components so that we can make sure that we're getting feedback on all of those different pieces.
Right, and on the original criteria, we went ahead and put in the title space what it was, and then in the subtitle space, you'll notice when you add new ones, there's a title and then there's a write something. So with the original criteria, we put what the criteria was and then what the metric was that was used. So if you have ideas on not only the criteria, but also what metric could be used, feel free to follow that format. But that's why down below, when you get to these ones that are in the white color, they do not have the subspace because these were just reactions off of the survey. So we have not identified what metrics would be. All right, any other pieces on this? No? Okay. So I'm just going to bring this back up for a moment. So we were looking to have additional meetings. We were thinking the week of the 9th and the 30th, and I'm going to quickly create a poll. Maybe. Let's see. Where you guys can talk about what best meeting dates there are. So then we can see if we are on the right track with the Tuesday or if we'd rather have different days.
And while Ellen's setting that up, we just want to again thank all of you for your participation today. We really appreciate you being here. I'm going to be sharing in the chat a facilities planning email. So we here on the facilities team, we're just moderators here to help really support this process. And so I'm going to share that email in the chat. If you have any emails throughout this process, if you need any information, we're going to provide an email and a phone number so that you can reach us. We are here to help you. And so every question is an important one, and we want to make sure that you're able to reach us and get the information that you need. And so please don't hesitate, and we'll also make sure that this information is shared with you through the email.
Okay, let me get this up, and I'm going to launch the poll. So yes, you guys can see it. That's always exciting. So if you could go ahead and fill out the poll of which day of the week works best and which start time. Oh, good, we guessed right at 5, or at least we have so far.
You have a typo on Thursday.
Sorry about that. Okay, we have 17 in out of 27, so we're humming along. And like I said before, this is the last meeting that I'm going to talk this much. The next meeting is definitely going to be a whole lot more of you guys talking and a whole lot less of us talking. So I hope you hang in there for that piece. All right, we have 19 out of 27. We'll give it another few minutes or seconds to see if we can get a few more people to answer.
Some of us are probably not voting, Ellen.
Yep, but I think that's only 5. So I was going to see if we got a couple more. But overall, it looks like Tuesday at 5 is a pretty good time for at least this group, and we had almost everybody from the committee join us. So I think we've probably got a good place here. So we will look at doing that again, and I will bring up here just as a reminder. Share screen. All right, so what the game plan is for our future meetings is the next meeting, we're hoping to narrow down to the criteria we really want to go forward as the recommendation to the board. So to be able to do that, we have to get from all of those different white tags and all those different yellow tags and make sure that the 2016 criteria we do want to keep, and that any of the additional criteria is considered and decided upon whether it should be in or out. So that's our plan for hopefully the week of November 9th, which would be the 10th. Once we have all the criteria, we need to make sure we have the correct metrics for each one of those criteria. And we have to discuss the weighting. Well, that might be a big chunk to do in November 30th, depending on how many new criteria come on. It might be quick or it might not be quick. So depending on how many new criteria we have will depend on how far into the weighting discussion we can get, but we definitely want to set the metrics at that meeting. The following meeting is December 14th, and we need to finalize the weighting. So again, there is discrepancy between what the weighting was in the original master plan and what the community thought the weighting should be. So this is the committee's opportunity to really talk and discuss and finalize what those weighting pieces should be for each individual criteria, and that will draft the final recommendation to go to the board. And then it's the board's place to take that recommendation or tweak it and then pass whatever they want as the final prioritization criteria, and then it will be applied to the different school sites. All right, sounds good. Hopefully that was, oh, we also have public comment. So, sorry. So that was the end of the, that presentation. Is there any additional public comment that we would like, or that anybody's raising their hand? We have 5 attendees. Would any of our 5 attendees like to comment? Seeing none, I think we're gonna call that a night.
Final call for panelists.
Oh, final call for panelists. Any other additional comments, questions? I see none there either. Well, good job. I hope we can maintain the finishing 6 minutes before the end in the future. We again really appreciate you guys being here and are so happy that so many people throughout the district are interested in this process. It is not done well without the community's participation, and so we are super grateful that you are here and hope to see you in 2 weeks.
We'll share the presentation and the results.
We will share the presentation, the results, and the Padlet with you shortly, so you will have those items for your perusal.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.